do you guys think about that concept in OT? Because for me, I would say.
So wait. I think you have to first define it for me. I have not practiced in a long while in community development.
Should kick us off there. I feel Mbali strongly.
No. So just for your viewers, just to say,
for the viewers,
define it.
I did say I practice. I do. I just don't practice in the field where I have to consider that. So I have completely forgotten it.
For me, I don't even want us to have.
You don't have to consider justice.
You have to explain it.
So for me, I don't even think we need how to call it, a definition, but just for me, what I do is just an understanding of what it means. So based on what the people that brought it out, they're trying to say that all humans have the right to engage in occupation, right? Mm-hmm. And normally when you see what is happening in the literature, nobody actually even goes, talking about occupational justice. You see they end up in occupational injustice. If you realize, because when you start talking about occupational justice, you end up talking about occupational injustice itself. Because what they just do is humans have the right to engage in whatever they want to engage in, irrespective of their abilities and what have you, social structures, and like everybody is entitled to equitable engagement, fair and equitable engagement in human occupation. And then you see all the forms that comes out is actually injustice. So for me, I feel like through going through the occupational injustice, you come to understand what the ideal of having occupational justice is. So basically, as I said, the right to, and you could, for me, like, as I started drawing closer to community OT, that's the first concept that I think it's common for every occupational. I might be wrong, but I think every occupational therapy knows about occupational justice.
You don't like occupational justice, and neither do you. So I'm saying before, like, we dip into it, we have to also just figure out our positionality when it comes to this concept, because even when I wrote about it in my last assignment, not this one, for my previous course, when I wrote about it, we had to critique an idea, I can't remember, and I critiqued occupational. No. I critique occupational alienation, I think, to a certain extent, because I can't remember what it was. I think what it came down to was an infringement on human rights. And I then started querying how then, as occupational therapists, it's cool just to say occupational this and occupational that, but actually failing to mention that it's actually a human right, like, first and foremost. I don't know, something to do with it, about humanism. So I can't remember, but I know that when they brought up occupational rights, and I was like, I think I use it in that regard, like, occupational rights, is that not just human rights?
Yeah, so I get you, but let me bring in this. You see, I was also having that kind of thinking where I felt like, I don't know, that's where you are.
Must I also use all of the stuff I'm saying? I don't know how much of it
are you worried that people want to find that?
Because and Wilcock, big deal.
No, it doesn't matter. We're actually helping in the knowledge generation, so it doesn't matter. But for me, sorry to catch you.
No, go ahead.
For me, what I think about this, like what you're saying, we always put in occupation. Like, for example, we have justice already, and then we come in and then we bring in occupational justice.
Do we have justice though?
No, like we have a term like
the
justice
word exists,
already,
man.
like it exists. No, it's not like everybody is having, like, living a just life, or the society is just, but justice is there as a concept.
Conflicted.
And then we just pick occupation and add it to it, occupational justice. So, like, based on your question that you're asking, is it not just human right? For me, I feel like I was also having the same question, like, why do we always do that? We just take occupational and then add it to something, like we have occupational this, occupational that, occupational this. But on the second thought, I also realized that when it happens like that, it keeps us on our trail based on the philosophy that we have as OTs. So it put us in a kind of thinking where your thinking becomes different from, like, most of these terms are sociological theories and concepts. But the moment you put that cognitively, the moment you put occupational there, it gives you a different kind of, like, you always look at the term in terms of what people do and what is making this happening. Like, it's always about doing, like, it puts you in that, like, what people do kind of sense, to be able to make sense of those terms. So, like, that is what I was thinking. So, like, I was like, okay, so it puts you in an occupation-based thinking of that particular concept with our philosophy and foundation. I don't know what you guys think about what I'm saying.
Like, my thing with occupational justice is great concept. I see where they're going with this, but I just feel that, like, in the way that, because I was talking about, like, classism and etc., like all that stuff, and then I was corrected because it was like, no, why do you have to look at it from that standpoint that everyone can't have justice in a way? But, like, the way the world is set up, or the way things are happening, somebody's gonna lose. Unfortunately, somebody's going to not experience justice. In occupationally, if you want to put the word occupational in front of it. But yeah, it's kind of a hard, it's like a very loaded term for me to wrap around, to just
wrap my head around, to grapple with,
to try practice, because grasp. I just feel like it's not, I'm not saying it's not possible, but I just feel like it's,
I think in Mali
it's like idealistic.
But it's also around the idea that if we haven't engaged with justice on its own, problem. How do we then go, let's go for occupational justice? If we haven't even, the base term of justice hasn't even been achieved for all people. Is that what you were saying, Mbali? I'm not sure, but I feel like that could be.
It's not really, like, realistic to me. So, I don't know.
So for me, it's utopia.
Perfect. Wow.
That's. I'm not saying, I'm not discrediting the ideal, but in reality, they are describing utopia. And here are my reasons. They might be stretched and all of that, so I don't know if they will make sense, because I haven't actually been asked this question before. I just knew from the start that, oh no, this is not for me, it's cool, I'm not even going to bother hurt my brain. So firstly, at the outset, is that when I learn in both languages and in something else that I don't even know how to explain, that is beyond language. So I sometimes have to translate from one language to the other. So my native language is Xhosa. Then I also speak English fluently. So sometimes I have to take one thing to the other. Occupational justice is the one term I can't move to the other language. It's just not there. In my language, we don't have that at all. So that's tricky, because the people that need occupational justice look like me for the most part, and I have to speak their language. Now, how do I work with people and tell them that, you guys, we're going to work on your occupational towards an occupationally just world? How do I say that in a language that they comprehend? So that's a first point. Then to those that now I would, let's say, all speak English and would understand when I say occupational justice is this, here's my dilemma. Occupational justice assumes that occupational justice theory or theorists assume that those that can enjoy meaningful occupation are human, right? But we know from Frank Cronenberg's work, in where he gives a critique of the Journal of Occupational Therapy's pledge on anti-racism, right? His opening words, I think, or somewhere early on in the introduction, is that being human is not a given. It's a political potentiality that there are people who are not considered human. And the people that write about occupational justice, I'm sorry, I must look in the camera for this one, live in worlds where people that look like me are not considered human.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people who write about occupational justice live in Australia. How are black people treated in Australia? People that write about this live in Europe. How are we treated there? I mean, we're called immigrants, and like people are being fined, and they're trying to chuck them out of Europe as much as possible. People like who write about occupational justice live in America. We know what happens to black people in America. And so occupational justice, for me, sounds like they're describing a utopian world for white people or rich people. Or it's rich people who feel guilty of having all this much wealth, like everyone else must also enjoy it, like so I can also enjoy mine peacefully without feeling guilty when I drive past you. So but maybe that's
but you're not meant to feel like you have to enjoy, or you can enjoy when you're in their presence.
You see, then the conflict is that, firstly, it is written mostly, I'm not saying that all the people that write about occupational justice are not black, but it's mostly white people. And so you have to ask yourself, are these people writing from a frame of reference that is white savior complex or not? And I'm sorry that I have to be that harsh, but these are questions that I asked myself when I read this. I was like, what? Hey, in South Africa, this? I love it. But
show me.
Also, the world that you come from and its action, make sure that this will never be achieved. That we must just keep dreaming about it. So I'm not sure if you ever read Animal Farm. A book by George Orwell. There's a crow that keeps telling people that when things get really rough in the farm and the animals are living in terror and fear of the pigs, then the bird, because it cannot be captured by the dogs who are roaming and who are security, so it can just fly around, it keeps telling all the animals, your worries are just temporary, when you die, you go to Candyland or something like that. And it was basically a satire or a metaphor for the church in Russia when things were really hard, and the church just kept saying, oh no, you're all going to go to heaven. This is just temporary. Embrace the suffering. I feel like occupational justice says that. It's like, oh, no, this is what we're going to... But we know it's not going to happen. And then my third point, and then I stop there, is that because of the 2 points that I've just mentioned, the framework of occupational justice, the assumptions that it makes are all Western. What I mean by that is that if occupational justice could be reframed using Ubuntu as a lens, Ubuntu is an African philosophy, a way of being, and it also informs how things are done. And Ubuntu is not about kindness, as people keep saying. Kindness has its own word in our languages. You can be human and not be kind. Not all humans are kind, right? But what Ubuntu says is that for you to be called a human being, you must first acknowledge other people's humanity. So they are saying that humanity can be conferred and also taken away. So if we start from that standpoint, then we can start talking about occupational justice. But currently, occupational justice is based on the idea that every human in the world is actually considered a human
in the world.
And that's not true.
But I think that also just goes back to everything that we were saying before this, about how the thinking, if it cannot translate into our doing, how does that then... We already are not doing humanness or humanity. So like, if I keep on calling and thinking of the patient as a diagnosis,
Yeah.
diagnosis.
Then you're not humanizing.
Then I'm not humanizing them.
You see, and you see if you work from an Ubuntu
Perspective. Or lens or...
Yeah, and Ubuntu is so interesting is that even the continent, our continent is not named by us. The word
not.
Africa is not an actual African term. Like, there's no language in Africa that can say, oh, this comes from, and this is what it means. It's a Latin term. We just adopted it and call ourselves, oh, I'm African. I'm like, all right.
Hey!
Sure. Whereas in my language, it's closer. Africa is Kwantu, which is to say where people come from, where humanity comes from. And we know this scientifically, historically, archaeologically, that the cradle of humankind is here. And so when we say Africa is in Xhosa, when we say that, oh, this is the home of the people, that's very accurate. And because then every human being you'll meet, we've now already considered them people, we can start talking about how we can change the world.
What we have to also do as OTs at this side is to actually also have the courage to own certain things. Like in terms of even theories, making them our own. For instance, like we're talking about occupational justice now, and like you looking at the concept and having conflicting kind of ideas, like how does it mean? We can also make it like from that perspective, we make it our own in our context, give our explanation, like critique, like how you're doing now, writing papers to challenge and giving what is why would I want to use idol, but I want to like what is actually happening here concerning that do you get the point? Because for me, I believe that how we develop theories, right, comes from a context and how we see things. That is what happens to them up there also sometimes, because maybe the person has experienced that context in this way, and this is how they see things in that context. So when it comes to writing, that is how it influences their writing. So for example, how you are also thinking right now is based on your experience in this context and how you understand what it means to be human in this part of the world. So so for me, I feel like we should also start putting out theories, or even if it's not theory, like understandings in that direction of like this is how we see human in this context, even if it's in South Africa or even if it's in Ghana. This is how humans are being perceived as being human. This is what human occupation is. So they get but I feel like sometimes we just when it comes in, we adopt, and then we ourselves unconsciously generalize that okay, this is the universal understanding. But when we realize that it conflicts with what it means to be an occupational being in our context, then we can actually also not just as a discussion, but also we as academics or even practitioners challenging that with our experiences and our understanding of who a human being is in it. Because for me, listening to you now, actually, like, it's amazing. Listening to the stuff that you are saying, it makes a lot of sense to me. But the thing is, now we have to also take that on and giving our views from the South, the global South, the perspective of, for example, I'm doing my research in spirituality. But if you see the definitions in spirituality that they are giving, in Ghana, if you bring it to our local language, like, it doesn't mean like that. Like, it doesn't. But like the mistake I can do is when I'm writing my paper, I'll still keep on reviewing literature on spirituality and giving that definition, and then even situate what I find my result in that definition. But I can also use our local language and explain why I'm using it and bring it out to represent like what I mean and how we Ghanaians understand. So for me, like, that is the perspective, because sometimes I don't agree with a lot of them, but I also feel like we critique and speak about them. We have to also like put it in action of like the academics or even OTs, like expressing it, and even if publish it, like even what we are doing now, you get it. Actually, also sends a kind of, because for me, I feel like those people theorizing based on what they see with their surroundings.
Yeah.
So basically,
I keep asking myself this question over and over again now that you're talking, and I'm like, does theorizing have to be universal?
No.
Like, why does it have to be universal? Because if it's working, like you're saying, spirituality is practiced a specific way in Ghana. There's certain ways we use terminology in Xhosa, and there's certain ways that we practice that work. Why are we forcing ourselves into this mold of Western and European ideologies and theories?
Exactly.
When it's not, because I get that, yes, there should be a level of equity and occupational justice, right? Some form of that, but what's wrong with sticking to what we know in our experiences?
Wait, I'm
In
not
terms of,
following.
like, I'm just saying,
Why must it be
like,
applicable to the North
why
also?
must when we theorize, why does it have to be universal in its
If
application?
you look at the reading on human occupation in the Southern perspectives, that textbook opens up with Motimele and Peters, and they literally say human occupation defies universal definition. And I think that can be applied with Mbali saying theories,
Okay, no, I
not
just want
not
to be
taking
clear.
that
Yeah,
universal definition.
I think we're just doing things in context, writing about things in context, and that's okay. I think many of the things that we've learned in our training, we were taught, or maybe even by ourselves to some degree understood or accepted them as being universally applicable when they really weren't.
Yeah.
I think that's why I was talking about courage. Like, you see, I don't know how we see, for example, per my experience, sometimes I feel like we Africans, I might be wrong, we see science and theory in something, like it should come from this kind of person, like a professor, like you see, I don't know, but per my experience, so people don't actually have the courage to say like this is what I'm doing, and this is how I'm going to conceptualize it in our context. And then, like, even if it will not be published in this journal, I'm targeting this journal in Africa to publish, just to share the knowledge. I mean, you're not thinking about how your theory is going to be universal, about how it's going to be contextually relevant in your context.
I think maybe it's because you guys call it theory.
That's the problem.
Yes. You see, theory is something that you can apply over and over and over again in any context, and it will give you the same results. That's theory.
What would you call it? If not
For
theory.
me, I think if you say
Thinking
that,
is fine, or theorizing.
but in social science, like how we are more drawn to,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be in a way. For me, that's how I think around it.
But there's no theory of occupation. Think of one. Tell me, which one do you have?
There isn't.
A model is not a
Mic drop.
theory. A model is not a
It's
theory.
not.
A construct is not a theory.
Yeah.
Concept. isn't a
Terminology is
theory.
not a theory.
What is theory?
It's something. It's a body of knowledge that usually has principles and conditions that must be met for a particular outcome. So if you look at Newton, for example, he came with the theory of
Newton's law of gravity.
gravity. You
yeah.
know, if you go to Erickson, the theory of psychosocial development, so you know what's going to happen at any point, right? We don't have that in occupational therapy at all. When it comes to occupation, we can talk and define occupation and all the things that it has and that are related to it, and we can even add occupational to other things.
And then it's a theory. No, I'm saying that's what we think.
Ah, it's
No,
not.
but that's what we think when we're
I'm
learning
saying,
it.
yeah,
but it's not.
It's
Yes,
not.
yes.
Because if you think about occupational identity, for example, that's not a theory, because you won't always find the same results.
Yes, sure. And also, even on that, oh, sorry, am I interrupting now?
No, you can tell.
Because even on that, where I would understand that the theory is that regardless of who hears it, they will receive it the same. But with us, we can stand in front of a class and someone can say something.
Yeah.
Every single person walks out there with a different opinion or understanding. Because that is why, when it comes to practicing, how is it that all OTs practice differently?
Because
Dealing with human
occupation is complex, multidimensional, and even us who are enacting it at any point in time never have the full grasp of everything that we're
So
doing.
even the grappling.
We don't even have the right words to say why it is that I'm using my hands as I'm speaking to you. Like, you just do it. And it gets even more complex when it's collective occupation. I mean, we've been in protests. You've seen it.
Oh, we've done it.
Have you seen a protest? When you're in a
Sure.
protest, that's an occupation. But have you seen a protest? It's very diverse behavior, and the outcome is never guaranteed. So how do you?
But
come up
also
with a
there's that
theory
sense of, but there's also that sense of like the purpose. I think everyone's standing there. I think there's sort of
Yeah.
a common goal there.
No. I'm not
talking about the goal.
Yes, I'm saying that there are constructs. So collective occupation says to us that
We are working towards.
it's either people working towards social cohesion or social dysfunction because they have a common goal. Okay, so then they all come together to protest, and we can even talk about occupation as protest. But that's what I'm saying.
But
Yeah.
looking at what you're dealing with as human occupation, do you think we can have a theory that can, like, when you put
I'm
it in
happy to not have a theory.
No,
like,
and
if it's
Yeah.
not
when you put a
possible,
theory, then
it's not.
We don't have to intellectualize everything.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
But I'm also wanting to know more and more and more and more, as much as possible, of all the different constructs. So in anything that comes up from a journal, occupational integrity, I'm like, ooh, what's that? You know, and I can use some of the ideas that they have, right? Occupational well-being. Oh, okay. You know, so I feel like if I were practicing fully, my job would be knitting these different things for
Putting it all together.
for a particular outcome.
Makes a lot of sense. All right, so I think, guys, we're going to end here. We had a great discussion. I really loved it. And so we're going to end here.
Oh, sorry.
What I want you to do is, if you've not subscribed to the channel, you have to subscribe and then
Below.
click the notification button.
Like,
And
It's
coming
there.
back, and as
Like
I always
this.
say, you can actually also do a video of yourself giving your thoughts on what we shared. I can post it on my channel, and also give your thoughts or your critique on whatever we discuss here. You can just share it on the comment section, and let's have the dialogue rolling. Let's share and create knowledge together. Thank you so much for your time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.